Hello and welcome back to another Thoughts Per Episode Classic Doctor Who edition. Today we're going to be talking about, gasp, Pyramids of Mars. That's right, we're doing our first ever sequence break, because for those of you who don't know, Thoughts Per Episode Classic Doctor Who edition, nice big mouthful of a title to say out loud, is a series where I sequentially watch through every fully available serial on BBC iPlayer of Classic Doctor Who, and we're yet to make it out of a Hartnell period, so this is kind of a jump forwards ahead in time. It might also be a little bit less coherent than usual because I did not sit down and watch through each episode and record my thoughts on each individual episode and take notes like I normally do. I watched the Tales of a TARDIS version while I was in bed last night and woke up this morning and went, I should make a video about that. Although the idea that I'm any kind of coherent to begin with normally is maybe being a little bit too kind to myself. So while I've never watched Tom Baker era Doctor Who before, this is not my first Tom Baker Doctor Who story. And you might be wondering, Christian, you've just said a contradiction. Not so. I am a fan of Big Finish productions, and I've listened to, firstly, I forget what it's called, but they did a special where 4 and 10 had an adventure together, and then also on their Into the TARDIS podcast, they re-released for free one of the fourth Doctor's adventures called Energy of the Daleks. And these are both played by the wonderful and legendary Tom Baker. That being said, yes, it's my first time watching Fourth Doctor era Doctor Who, my first time watching Tom Baker and Elizabeth Sladen on screen together. God, Sarah Jane Smith is so instantly likeable. That moment where she's introducing herself to that guy, I forget his name, but he invented the thingamajig 40 years early, and he seems very confused by what's happening, and she says, yes, I'm a journalist from the 1980s, and I travel in time with my friend the Doctor, and he's like, that's ridiculous, and she goes, yes, of course, sorry. She's so sassy. Well, not sassy, I don't know if that's the right word, but she's so, she almost reminds me of Clara in that, in how she kind of, Clara haters just vehemently shook their heads, but in how, like, flippant or, I guess, nonchalant Clara was about that kind of thing and how lighthearted she was. I guess Clara was probably an attempt to harken back to Sarah Jane Smith now that I think about it. Speaking of harkening back, I also realised that Peter Capaldi's 12th Doctor, I think, takes a lot of cues from Tom Baker's 4th Doctor in many ways. Like, I was reminded of 12 when they walk into that house and they find their friend dead, and Sarah Jane is very rightfully upset about this, and then she yells at the Doctor for being heartless and just kind of like taking it in his stride, and she says, a man is dead, and he's like, 5 men if you count, the guy who's being possessed. Like, clearly, like, he's keeping count. It still affects him, it still bothers him, but this iteration of the Doctor is very much one who is trying to stay on task. Now, I will say, I've heard of Pyramids of Mars before, like, in terms of, like, classic Doctor Who episodes, in, like, the favourites, the ones to watch. Pyramids of Mars has definitely been in my consciousness, on my radar, I guess. And I expected something slightly different, having heard of that title for like 20 years and then never done anything about it. I expected there to be more pyramids on more Mars. I expected, since that, we've just had this reveal of Sutekh in modern Doctor Who, that this classic story would be more about, the last time he was unleashed. But most of his story is about preventing Sutekh from escaping. Most of his story takes place on Earth and is concerned with dealing with the kind of cultist and, the acolyte and that kind of thing. And I guess I shouldn't be surprised, because that's by and large what classic Doctor Who is. It's less about crazy giant set pieces, and it's more about, thinking about how to solve the problem of stopping the crazy giant set pieces from ever happening in the first place. In that way, you could argue that the classic Doctors are more adept at handling situations than the modern Doctors. But having heard about how iconic Sutekh is as a villain, I was wondering if that was going to fall a bit flat for me. But actually, no, I do really like Sutekh in the Pyramids of Mars. I think the fact that, and maybe I'm not getting the full effect because I haven't watched through Doctor Who up to this point, so I don't know how often the Doctor ends up being in a bind where he's being tortured and he's met with this creature which is infinitely more powerful than he is, and he's like, you can tell Tom Baker's Doctor in this Serial is pretty outright afraid throughout most of it. But for me, the highlight of this serial was the end, probably the end episode, where the Doctor and Sutek are, talking, and Sutek's trying to work out what the Doctor is. He's like, oh, you're a Time Lord, why are you concerning yourself with humans, and all that kind of thing. Tom Baker's performance when he was possessed by Sutek was legitimately unsettling, and I think, that shot of Sutek with his giant glowing green eyes staring right into the camera as he's talking to the Doctor. If I was a kid, I probably would have run and hid behind a sofa as well. One of my favourite Sarah Jane Smith moments from his serial was when the Doctor handed her the gun because she needed to shoot the explosive from afar to destroy the ship or whatever. And the Doctor's like, do you know how to use that thing? Careful, you'll put your eye out, or whatever he says. And Sarah's just like, yes, I've got this. And she's very, very powerful in that moment, very Lois Lane, very... I guess modern Lois Lane, I should say. I love her confidence, like, she almost rivals the Doctor for, there is a thing that needs doing, so we are going to do it. By the way, I was surprised when it comes to Sutek that there was lore about what he is. He is part of a race called the Osirans, who clearly came to Earth during the ancient Egyptian times and were fighting on Earth, and that's where our Egyptian mythology comes from. And he was defeated by the Osiran Horus and stuff, which obviously aligns with our mythology. I say our mythology, but Egyptian mythology. I find it endearing that the writers decided to... I guess endearing is a good word for it, that they decided to try and tie Egyptian mythology into like this kind of like alien origin and that kind of thing, but then Sutek in Egyptian mythology isn't a god of death, he's a god of deserts, storms, disorder, violence, and foreigners. So while they've got the Horus part right, of being like the god of light and everything, they've got the Sutek part wrong, or I guess they've just altered it, and you could always put it down to like, well, Egyptian mythology was never going to match the actual facts of who these aliens were one for one, but still. But yeah, I was wondering how, because in the modern show, Sutek is described as being the god of all gods, this pantheon which was ushered into existence from Wild Blue Yonder onwards. So I was wondering how Sutek could exist pre-Wild Blue Yonder. To be fair, I could have also considered the fact that the Toymaker existed pre-Wild Blue Yonder, and it's interesting that they've given him a very Doctor Who backstory of he's of a powerful race, ancient race in the universe called the Osirans and stuff, and I wonder if that's going to get referenced at all in Modern Who, because they do. I watched the Tales of the TARDIS episode, and the 15th Doctor does say like, oh, he's different now, he's bigger, he's evolved, he's changed, so clearly like he's now become this god of gods where he wasn't before. He's become the head of this pantheon which didn't exist before, which is very weird. It's a weird way of trying to retroactively or I guess we're going to use the word retcon. It's a weird way of trying to like retcon what happened before whilst also acknowledging what came before. I don't know if it works, and I don't know if it's worth worrying about, but that's a whole thing. Either way, it's a good excuse to bring a cool villain back, isn't it? Anyway, bit of a shorter one today because, like I said, I didn't take notes. But I thought I should probably just give a very quick update on the fact that I've seen Pyramids of Mars, my general top-down overview of what I thought about the serial. One thing I've taken away from this, I am really excited to get to the Tom Baker era of Doctor Who. It's much more easy viewing than the William Hartnell era, that's for sure. But with that being said and done, I will be back here to talk to you tomorrow about the finale to Series 1 or Series 14 or whatever you want to call it. People still haven't settled on one. And in the meantime, that's going to do it for me, and I will see you in that thing that I'm going to make next. Normally I say whatever I make next, but I have a pretty solid idea this time around. Oh, and I have one blooper for you. Are you ready? Bloop! And these are both played by the wonderful... what's his name? Tom Baker. Bloop!